Hey race fans, are you infected with the sickness? Are you a raceaholic? Do you love racing? Oh, you more than love it. You're downright addicted to it. Oh, okay. So you eat, sleep, and breathe racing, whether it's dirt track racing, drag racing, road course, or off-road, motorcycles, trucks, sprint cars, stock cars, Formula One, or lawnmowers. Doesn't matter the shape or size? Oh, okay. Well, if you live to race or live for the next chance to sit in those stands, smell those fumes, hear those sounds, and witness the amazing acts of bravery and skill from your local heroes, well, guess what, my friends? You are a raceaholic. Wear your addiction with pride. Get on over to raceaholic.net and get your t-shirts, hoodies, hats, decals, license plates, and a lot of other cool stuff, and prove to the world that you are a raceaholic.
Raceaholic Racewear Studios in beautiful Gainesville, Florida. It's On the Cushion, brought to you by the Bowman Auto Group. Now, here are your hosts, Josh Bolden and Dirty Dan Smith.
All right, On the Cushion fans, man, do we have something special for you today. I cannot wait to get this interview going. Josh, this guest is just blowing my mind right now.
It's blowing my mind, too.
All right. Well, let's not make him wait any longer. Let's let everybody know who we got on the phone. And we got the 1960 NASCAR champion, Mr. Rex White, on the phone with us. How you doing tonight, Rex?
Well, I've been better. I just broke my leg a couple months ago, and I'm trying to get over that.
Now, I heard you've been trying to do some recovery and stuff. How's that coming along?
Well, it's not been healing like I'd like for it to. But I don't know if age has got anything to do with that or not. Possibly has.
Now, you're not that old, Rex.
Well, I don't feel all that old.
You didn't break it in a car or anything, did you?
No, a swing fell on my leg and broke it.
Oh, that's not good. You need to stay away from them swings, I guess, huh?
Yeah, that I won't never have trouble with that one again.
I think racing's a little more safer than that, so maybe we need to find you another race car.
Yeah. I was pretty lucky in a race car. I never got hurt bad at all.
Hey, you were. We were looking over some of your stats, but before we get into all that, I want to go back to what attracted you to racing. I know that you grew up there in the North Carolina area and big moonshine territory and everything, but what was it that attracted you to motorsports as a young boy?
Well, I don't know. I was born in Taylorsville, North Carolina, and in the early 30s and 40s, there was a lot of bootlegging going on, and I knew people that had fast cars and knew some people that worked on them, and later, and when I got about 10 or 11 years old, I worked for a wholesale grocery company, and I hauled the sugar, the rye meal, and the fruit jars for people that made whiskey. But I never actually hauled any. But that lapped over into, they opened a racetrack in Norfolksburg, North Carolina. I seen the signs, but never got a chance to go. So I moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. And a guy come along and put a sign in the window, start car racing on Friday night. Well, I looked at that for a couple months. Almost the whole season was gone. And I finally come up with enough money to go to a race. And my wife and I went to the race, and the first car that I ever seen come out and go around the racetrack, I said, that's what I want to do. So I set out to do that.
Now, wait. You had some relatives help you out to get together, right? Back in about 1954 or so?
No, I really didn't have a lot of close relatives. I had some relatives of my wife's, on my wife's side that actually give me the start in racing financially.
Uh-huh. How much was it back then, Rex, to get started and go Grand National racing?
It was so little I don't even remember the amount. But the cars we built was out of the junkyard, most of it, very little machine work. Of course, to build an engine and all, we had to do machine work, and so we could get some horsepower out of it. And we actually built my own engine, built my own car and everything. But I worked for Frankie Snyder prior to that, and learned an awful lot about chassis, making a car handle tires, gear ratio, and so I started in racing with quite a bit of knowledge. And actually, the second year that I'd run a race car, I won races.
Right. How many races did you win in that second year?
I won those numbers? I won 6 races that year.
Now, for the string that you had there in NASCAR, there at one point you had more wins than a lot of the legends did, as I remember correctly, didn't you?
Well, in 1956 was the start of my Grand National career, and I actually won a race the first year I ever raced Grand National. Finished second in the points in the short track division. Had to go to California, and so I could finish second. So anyway, my Grand National career was when I started winning races. And in 1957, I won races. 1958, 59, I won 4 or 5 races. 1960, I won the championship. I won more races than anybody. From 1959 to 62, I won more races than anybody.
Yes, you did, including Lee, Richard Petty, Ned Jarrett, who else? Fireball, Junior, Curtis, Buck. I mean, there was just a ton of legends there that people look to nowadays, and you had a way more, you was winning more races than these guys were. Now, I guess we're going to kind of skip around here a little bit, but, you kind of jumped out of the car, and there's really never been any answers on that. Is there anything at this day and time that you kind of what caused you to get out of the car?
Well, the biggest reason I got out of racing was money.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have a sponsor and don't have I kind of did away with my crew and my racing shop and everything, and without that, you can't go racing. So I went to work for a guy. I opened a Chrysler Plymouth dealership, and I started making more money, really, at that than I did when I was racing. So I just never got back in it.
Now, going back to that, money in racing, you was the top Chevy driver, and actually, was the man for Chevy back when you was in the Grand Nationals. Now, Chevy getting out of that, I know you run, what was it, one season after Chevy quit?
Yeah, 1964.
Yeah, you went ahead and run that last year. Chevy, did they help you out quite a bit during those early years?
1963. In 1962, they come with the 427, and I thought we was going to have a great, excuse me, a great racing car that year. A lot of horsepower. Went to Daytona a week before the race out there and said we're getting out of racing. So that killed the whole season, and I run the Chevrolet up till July, then went to Mercury. And I wasn't very successful with the Mercury. Matter of fact, I never won a race with it. But I went to work for Bud Moore after I sold my Mercury, and I had some pretty good finishes with Bud. But actually, Chevrolet never supported me any from 1963 to the end of the year. They paid what money they said they was going to pay me, and that was all I got out of Chevrolet.
Now, you've done a lot of testing for Chevy out there in Arizona on that 427, didn't you?
I did. I was the first one to test it, put it in a race car, and run it. And we did a lot of testing. The whole program was way behind, and we were just lucky to be at Daytona as good as we was. But I did a lot of test work. Had Junior Johnson come out, was going to let him help do testing out there, but he didn't like the way we was running, the way we had to run in a 5-mile circle and no guardrail or nothing. He said, I'm not going to run out here, so he left and went home. So I stayed there and tested the whole time.
Wow.
Run 177 miles an hour.
That's what I was going to ask you. How fast would you guys run? Now you guys was testing in an Impala, wasn't you? A 62 Impala? Now, what was that like? 170 mile an hour in a 1962 Impala.
Well, in a 5-mile circle, it's just not any problem, to run that in that big a racetrack. It's almost like a straightaway, But to run 177, I qualified 168 at Daytona in that car in 1963.
Wow. Wow, that's just amazing. When you think back about the tires you guys was running and the chassis development at that time, that had to kind of raise the hair on the back of your neck a little bit, didn't it, Rex?
Well, we was running a 6-inch tread, 6-inch width tread tire with tread on it. We didn't run slicks then. I never run a slick in NASCAR at all, ever. I always run treaded tires. Matter of fact, you had to run what Goodyear and Firestone had, and they was treaded tires. They didn't go to slicks until, I'm not sure, 68 or 69 before they started running all slicks.
Now, you have an interesting story about them treaded tires in a race up there in Canada, don't you? About some rain and somebody having some tread. Who was it that had the good retread tires?
Yeah, Cotton Owens had a set of recaps from Towel City recapping in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And when it started to rain, boy, those tires really worked out good. And Cotton was really set until it got dry, and then I believe Lee Petty wound up winning the race.
Now, you're credited. This leads me into another question for you, Rex, another route here. But you're really credited with being one of the first people to really look at running and trying to win a championship. Looking at a whole season instead of just a per race deal. But a couple times, where was it? Atlanta, that you was following around, knew that you was going to be short on gas, and kind of put the draft into motion. And
well, I was in 1962 when I won the race down there. It worked out so our last pit stop, we knew we was going to have to fuel again and maybe couldn't make it. And Marvin Patch was leading the race in Glenn Wood's car. And so anyway, Louis kept putting on the board gas, question mark, gas, question mark. So I said, well, I'll just sit here and ride behind Marvin and draft him. And I didn't even try to pass him. Don't know if I could or not. But he run out of gas. I won the race, and Joe Ellie run second.
Now, back then, you knew you were drafting him and saving gas, but that's all we hear about today at Talladega, Daytona, and this aero push and things like that on these new cars. But was the draft a big deal back then? Did people pay attention to it like they do now?
Not near as much as it is now because they're not running near as fast. The faster the speed, the more the draft comes involved. But see, in order to get up there and race him and pass him, you got to stand on it harder. You ride behind the guy and back out of it and stay off of him, and you save fuel. Well, I made it, and I did, and he didn't.
It kind of, for the fans out there that don't really understand what we're talking about, it's kind of like running down the highway behind a semi in your car, and you're not using near as much throttle as near as much gas, and still doing the same speed. But Rex, there's something that I just can't get out of my mind. When I look at your stats and the different tracks and things that you've run in your career, we know that you were primarily, I don't know, you may reach through the phone and strangle me for saying this, but you were primarily a short track ace. That's where 90% of your wins come from. You was a real threat. Yeah,
I started on short, flat racetracks of all kinds, dirt and pavement both. And I was more experienced at it. But I'm going to tell you what hurt me a lot in 59, 60 to 61 is Chevrolet's 348 just didn't have any horsepower on the big racetracks. But we did have enough durability that we still could win races on shorter racetracks. We could do better. But, I won all my races mostly on short quarter-mile, half-mile racetracks.
Now, the one thing that's really sticking out at me is you run both courses at Daytona. You run the old beach road course, and you also run at the big track that's there now. What was it like? I can't fathom what it was like to run on the sand and then onto the pavement and then back on the sand, as rough as that sand was. What was it like back then to run that race? It had to beat the hell out of you.
Well, it didn't beat the driver near as it did the car. I run the beach course 4 years, 54 to 58, and I only finished 2 races the whole time. and tore the transmission or clutch out the other time. I finished in 1957, and but to dodge all them holes was hard to do, and I learned something down there when it was too late, is not be trying to run in second gear or low gear or anything like that. Of course, we didn't have a 4-speed back then in 57 and all, but you had to go through them holes in high gear and just try to run through them wide open like Curtis did. And if you got a shift, you're going to tear up a box. It was just brutal. The holes was almost big enough to put a 37 Ford in coming off the pavement in the south turn.
Curtis was an animal out there on that sand, wasn't he?
You bet. Yeah, he was good at it. Probably the best of broad sliding for a mile than any driver I've ever seen.
Hey, now that leads me into what was it like? What did you guys as drivers and you personally think when the big track opened and you didn't have to run that beach course anymore? I mean, there had to be a bit of excitement over that.
Well, you know, a lot of people went to the racetrack, and I've heard the statement that Lee Petty made, went in the racetrack and looked and said, boy, somebody will get killed on this racetrack, and he come close to being him. But the big racetrack did not bother me one bit. It was just another racetrack, only it was bigger. I drove around Daytona before it was ever paved on the dirt with Billy France in the car in a 58 Pontiac, and it was another racetrack that you had to conquer. It didn't bother me as far as any fear of any kind whatsoever.
Right. That's interesting to know. Now, you know, coming from the dirt ranks and the old tracks like you did, and then then all of a sudden the dirt tracks kind of went to the wayside and we moved into the pavement era that we're in now. What kind of changes did you see? You know, and what kind of changes with the drivers and attitudes was there moving into this new era? Well,
really, when I was running, it really wasn't a big change into like it is now. I knew about the draft at Daytona in 1959. You had them 59 T-birds down there, and you come up behind one and catch a draft. If you didn't start turning out pretty quick, you'd almost run into him. But you could run behind them and run half throttle.
Oh,
so
wow.
Everybody knew about the draft as soon as they got there. I qualified in a 59 Chevrolet, 137 miles an hour, and I think fast speed was about 148, right at 150, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But you could drive around there running 135 mile an hour and smoke a cigarette.
Now,
or read a magazine.
just kind of relax and put it on cruise control, huh?
Yeah, well, you can run wide open and without any problems whatsoever.
Wow. Hey, now I want to talk to you about a track that's not on the schedule anymore. We'll kind of move into the modern day here as we move along with this discussion, and but I want to talk to you about Darlington, and your runs at Darlington, and I know you had a best finish, a second there at Darlington. But you top 10 there quite a bit. So what was that track like for you, and do you miss seeing that track on the schedule? Well,
I went to Darlington in 1955 in a modified, and had second fast time. Darlington, you had a 3 and 4 turn. You run closer to the wall then than you do today. In 3 and 4, you literally followed that wall all the way through the turn. And you'd just touch it a little bit, and you'd hear it and feel it, but it wasn't a big problem, just touching it a little bit. But anyway, the Magneto quit on the car. I didn't finish, but I got around the racetrack good, and I liked the racetrack, and I run good every time I went there.
Now, there is one track that you run really well at that you only went to one time, Rex. And we all know what the history of this track is and what the racing's like there nowadays. But at Bowman Gray, was the racing back then like it is today, the beating and the banging and just
I would say identically the same. That's about the only way you're going to race on a quarter-mile racetrack. And 3 and 4 at Bowling Gray's bank the opposite. It's got a little bit of reverse bank on it. So you got to make a car handle there, or you're not going to get to the front. And I won 6 Grand National races there.
Yeah, you won a bunch of races there. That was for sure. Now I want to move into the modern day if we can, Rex, if you don't mind doing that. I want to talk about some things here. Bristol's another track that I'd like to talk to you about. And the reason being is this new progressive banking versus, just traditional banking, just a straight angle banking like what we're, used to have and what most tracks are. What do you see as the differences in these tracks that you run back in the day, and remember them like that, and then you see these changes with progressive banking and the big stands and all this? What's some of your thoughts about that?
Well, I got a second at Bristol in one of the races up there. It was the best I ever finished. But Bristol, to me, is too fast. You don't have any time to react. Your visibility, if you're going in the corner, there's a wreck coming off the next corner. You can't see because you're turning and the bank is in front of you. Bristol, to me, I never liked. I still think it's too fast. But they have hell of races there, and it draws a lot of people. But I didn't really like Bristol that much.
What was your favorite track that you run on that they still either? I want this, if we can make this a 2-part question. What is your favorite track that you ever run on? Period. Running the NASCAR division.
Well, I've been asked that a lot of times. I always kind of liked the racetrack that I won on.
And I'm going to guess Montreal is what you're going to say.
No, Manassas, Virginia.
Okay. That one surprised me.
that was my second win at Manassas, Virginia. And it's still running today. It's a third of a mile, pretty high bank, big sweeping turns, and that was the easiest racetrack to make a car handle on and race on that I ever run on.
Now, out of the current tracks that the NASCAR series is running on today, what would you pick as being your favorite track?
Oh, and they're running today.
Yeah. I know you live close to one.
Well, I'd still like Martinsville because I like to run a flat racetrack because I like to race against guys when I know I can beat them,
Right.
And make the car handle and outdo them. But, Richmond to me would be a good, I would kind of like to run that racetrack. Or even Iowa, the new racetrack at Iowa would be another one.
Boy, that's a nice track out there, isn't it?
It is.
Iowa puts on some good races, too.
Looks like it's a lot of fun to run on.
It does. It's one of those short tracks that thinks it's a super speedway, but it looks like a driver's track, that's for sure. Now, you mentioned something there that you like to go to the races and compete to where you knew you could beat people with your abilities and with your talent by setting the car up, and not only that, behind the wheel. Now, today we see these cars. A lot of people say that the racing's better today. A lot of people, including myself, don't agree with that. I like it back to where it was in the driver's hands. Do you see that today, and do you have an opinion on that?
Well, NASCAR has took all the ability of a mechanic to read between the lines, and some people call it cheating and all like that. But if you don't work hard every time, if you go to the racetrack and win the race, you got to go home and go to work, because next week when you come back, somebody that runs second, they went home, they went to work because they want to come back and win. So you got to work from week to week. You got to be on the ball and do everything you can to come back competitive. Today, the racing is so competitive, so close qualifying, 0.3 of a second from first to 30th. That's unbelievable. And so today it's unbelievably competitive, the worst I've ever seen. But I think it's good racing. I don't mean wrecks and stuff like that or somebody hitting somebody. I mean running side by side and racing. I like to race, not beat and bang.
I agree with you there. And coming with you being the short track ace that you were, I don't think today's fan Rex, understands the difference when a racer says, I want the close racing, I want strategy, I want to be able to figure out how to get around the guy. You know, you don't have to wreck somebody to have the good, close, exciting racing. But in the same sense, now we have aero push, and we've got this, and we've got that.
The tires, and aero is so important. It's unbelievable what the wind does on these cars. You can take your fist and hit that front air dam, and it'll change that car. It's unbelievable how much it'll change that car.
Well, it is unbelievable. Now, you know, there's no doubt the cars are safer now today, you know, without a question, without a doubt. But, you know, that leads me into, you and I were talking last week, getting this set up. And, you know, you really had to, you mentioned some things, you know, about really having to work your way up and earning everything that you had. And we've talked about that a little bit today. And really, you know, proven that you should be there and having to produce results. But in today, we see these bio rides, and money has just become such a huge factor that talent is almost overruled by money nowadays. Do you see that? Or
totally. You're not going to get a ride if you go to a car owner and you say, I've got $1 million. I'll give you a good example. There's a little kid down here in Middle Georgia. His father wanted to get him started in the Grand National Racing or ARCA and get going, and he wanted me to ask James Hilton if he could put his son in the car. The first words James Hilton said to me is, his father got any money?
Mm-hmm.
And and racing really has always been that way. It's just so much bigger now. Indianapolis has went this way 10, 15 years ago. If you wanted to ride up there, you didn't get a ride unless you had money or brought a sponsor with money. And It's just come more and more money-oriented racing is, it's unbelievable.
It's definitely got to a point where marketing and money has over-trumped talent. You know, used to, like you're saying, you know, if you was talented and you could produce results on the track, you could find sponsors and find enough money to go racing. But it seems almost exact opposite now.
Yeah.
If you've got the money, then you've got the ride. If you've got talent and no money, then you don't have a ride.
There's probably hundreds of young drivers with in the right equipment and the right day, they could run up front. But they will never get there because they don't have the equipment.
Right. Now, you know, we touched a little bit. Is it all right to say your age, Rex?
Sure.
Okay, you're 82 years old, correct?
Uh-huh.
And that's going to make you the oldest living member of the NASCAR Top 50.
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Correct?
I'm the oldest living champion.
Now we got another cool little tidbit a lot of people probably don't know either, don't we? And that has to do with you being the smallest man to ever catch a NASCAR championship.
You mean height-wise or weight-wise?
Height and weight-wise.
Well, now I'm taller than Tom Pistone.
Okay. we'll have to get a hold of Tom and see what he has to say.
But I would have to be close to smallest driver. Yes.
What was it like? You know, we talk about the old, you know, back in the day when you were racing and everything, and we think about, you know, some of the other stars. I'm trying to think. It's Tiny Lund. Let's put Tiny Lund out there, for example. Yeah. And you're out there racing with these guys. And did that ever? Did it add fuel to your fire? The intimidation.
Never thought about it. The only time that I ever thought about that is when maybe some of the races that we run, I got tired. But hell, most of the time, the big drivers got tired before I did.
Did it ever change did it ever affect any decisions made on the track, whether you maybe use the old chrome horn at a time or anything like that?
No, it never affected being that way, being tired or anything and hit anybody or nothing.
Right. That's pretty cool.
The World 600, that extra 100 miles up there, that's tough, especially with no power steering and heat and everything. You really got to talk to yourself to do that last 100 and do it so that you don't do the car justice. I ran there in 1963 and probably could have finished second. I think I did finish third, but anyway, I broke the thing that I had that hold me in the seat on the side, and it started punching in my ribs. And boy, I struggled that last 100 miles up there. It was really tough.
Now, you brought up another interesting point, Rex. Power steering in today's racing, power steering, and power steering. I don't know whether it was the greatest thing that ever happened to racing or one of the worst things that ever happened to racing. The reason I say that is, you really had to drive a car. You really had to have talent to drive the cars without power steering. Now it seems like with power steering, along with that came the influx of the so-called young guns. Where we see the 12, 13-year-old kids in the late models now.
Yeah, they didn't have the arms and the strength to drive a car.
Right.
The cars with the 10X slicks that they got now, if they didn't have power steering, these little guys, they wouldn't last 100 miles.
If that. I don't even think they'd get the cars out turned and get them out of the pit. What about you, Rex?
Power steering, without power steering, they wouldn't be running.
Now, I agree with you 100%. Now, I'm gonna see if you can remember a name here, and I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything, but back when you were racing, there used to be a guy or a kid that come and hung out with you, and he used to go up and down pit road after the races, and he'd reach in the passenger side window and grab them shifter knobs off the cars. You remember who that was? And you always told him to put the shifter knobs back. But those parts cost teams money.
I don't remember his name, but I remember several of them stealing your shifter arm, and I lost several helmets.
Helmets. Now, see, helmets are a big collectible nowadays. Have you ever seen any of those helmets that you had come up missing pop up on eBay or anything nowadays?
No, not that I know of.
We'll have to start looking for some of them, won't we? See if we can get some of them back.
Yeah.
All right, Rex. There's just been a lot of changes and things in NASCAR, and I really wish that we had. It just seems like everything's become sanitized, and we just don't have the personalities that we used to have. Do you see that in today's racing? And what's some of the biggest differences if we take money and the actual car out of the equation, and we talk about some of the biggest differences between when you was racing and today's racing? What would those be? Well, as far as you're concerned,
you first thing, you got to go to school or get somebody to train you how to talk, say the right things before the cameras and all like that. I'm not a real good speaker on TV or radio and stuff like that when I get a microphone, especially if I got to carry it myself. When I got somebody like you to ask questions and do things, I do fairly well. But I just need more knowledge or learn how to speak to audiences and things like that. But kids have got to learn how to speak to start with. That's the first thing that Bill Elliott's son. That's the first thing he taught him, how to speak. And it's so important. You got to learn that, and it's just a different path to get to being a race car driver today than it was when I was around. You got to have uniforms and all that stuff. When I raced in whatever I had on.
You see a lot of pictures from back then, T-shirts, blue jeans, just, and it really was. It was a true run what you brung back then, wasn't it?
You bet. It's just totally different, and the sport has changed. And I'd have to say that it's changed for the better. It was rough then, and the cars didn't look as good, and we run a lot of times. Half of the season is not do a lot of work on the car to make it look good. We had to just make the race, and we didn't worry about being bent up a little bit as long as the car was raceable.
It was more you. I guess if people had to put it in perspective, it'd be more like what the grassroots racers and short track racers of today are doing at the local tracks. Only you guys were traveling a little more than they are. but the same sense where you're just doing basic maintenance, oil changes, and parts breakage, things like that. Where today, I mean, we've got what, 20, 30 cars in a stable, and brand new this, brand new that, and anyway.
You race a lot different when you only got one race car. And you got to make a living. You got to feed your family out of what comes out of the race car and pay any help you got or anything like that. You race different. You don't get against a guy and beat and bang or take a chance of getting wrecked. You got to finish. And the old saying has been said by many people: to finish first you must finish.
That you do. That you do. You brought up another good point. Money. I can't move past the money thing, Rex. It just really bugs me. You're talking about when you started out racing and through your career, and there's a lot of guys still doing this at the regional and local levels to this day. But everything that car produced was actually to pay the bills at home and hope that you had enough money to get to the next race. But with the money involved in the sport today, it's almost like hunger's not there anymore. That it's really not important what happens from this week to the next week as long as all the right things are said.
Sure, you're going to race different because you know that somebody else is going to pay the bill and the car's going to be there. So you take chances that you wouldn't near take years ago in racing.
Right. All right. Hey, Rex, I'll tell you, you've been more than free with your time here. This has been a great interview. I could talk to you all night long. But is there one thing in going out here, is there any one regret looking back over your career and over your life, and we'll just stick with racing here, but is there anything that you regret either doing or not doing that you wish you could go back and maybe change?
Well, little things like missing the short track championship in 1959. I went to Fresno, California to run one race, took a ball joint and didn't finish, and lost the championship by 7 points to Marvin Porter. Going back down the road, heading back to North Carolina, I figured out how we could have done that and still won the championship. That's called hindsight. But if I had one of the things that I wish I had done in 1965 is still stay in Grand National racing and run another 4 or 5 years. I think I could have won more races and even added to wins to my career and everything.
Now, you still have a stat that I don't think will ever get broken. There's just no way I see this happening in today's age and time. But you run 233 races in NASCAR. You finished in the top 10 163 times, I believe.
Yeah, I finished in the top 10 70% of the time that I run Grand National.
And that's just an astounding number, And to know that the way you done it, Rex, you done it shoestring budget from one race to the next, really never having any huge backing. And I don't, number one, we'll never see that again. Number two, I don't ever think we'll see that number eclipsed.
Well, that number could be broken. And somebody like Kyle Busch, he's probably could be getting, started on breaking that record. I don't know if he will or not. Recently, he went back the other way, so I hope he gets it turned around. And, of course, I don't mind to see somebody break that record.
Now, you brought up Kyle Busch. We're just going to keep talking, Rex. You brought up Kyle Busch. In today's crop of drivers, who do you see other than Kyle Busch? Is there any others you see that maybe remind you of a throwback of a time gone by?
Jimmy Johnson could possibly get up there. I don't know. It depends on how many more years he raced. He's in his 30-something now. But and you talking about cutting this thing off. You the one's got to switch. You can cut me off any time.
We're going to keep this running. We'll just talk all night.
All right.
We'll just hope people enjoy our conversation. And to be honest with you, I'm enjoying it. So, we'll just run with it. Do you have a favorite driver in today?
Mark's older, and Mark Martin, and he kind of races the way I used to, worry about finish, not knocking people around. guy come up faster behind you, you let him go and run your race car and drive your race. You don't worry about other people a lot of times, especially when you're starting a 500-mile race. You can't be first 4 or 5 laps. And but I kind of pull from Mark at times, like to see him win another race. And I don't know, I kind of like Tony Stewart. I like his way he handles himself and tells everybody to kiss his butt, and if they don't like it, he'll punch them in the mouth. I kind of like Tony.
That's definitely a throwback style. I like Old Smoke myself. You know, we were talking to Red a couple of weeks ago about Smoke, and he had a funny story about going to the Taco Bell, and that neither one of them having any money to pay for Taco Bell, so they had to run back to Smoke's house and get some money. And there was a guy going out to check the mail, and they were going so fast as they went by, this guy spun around 3 or 4 times from the wind. Now, that was a story from Red. Do you buy that story?
It's possible. It's possible.
Red said he'd never been so scared in his life as he was that ride back to Tony's house to get that money. You got any cool stories like that? Yeah, from back when you was racing. Any things that people really don't know about that you still think about to this day or amuse you to this day?
Well, I was at Daytona in 1954, I think it was, and I was driving for a guy in Silver Spring, Maryland, at Daytona on a road course. And you go down A1A to the south turn, and it's a dead end there in those days. There wasn't no place to go if you didn't turn, except in the palmetto bushes. And so we had a skip in the car. And I kept trying to tell Brownie he was skipping, so we went down on the back stretch, and he wasn't but a couple houses on that A1 part of A1A back in those days. And so he said, come by me about 100 miles an hour so I could hear it. So anyway, I'm backed up there and turned around, and I didn't think about where he was standing was past where the diamonds in the road was for you to be shutting off and getting into the south turn. Well, I went by him wide open. I happened to look down in them diamonds, and I hadn't shut off. And I started getting stopped, and I crossed it up and got in the corner. When I slid in that south turn, there was a car sitting right in the middle of that turn. And, boy, I just scared the heck out of me. I knew I was going to hit him. Well, anyway, I got it under control, missed him, and slid by him, turned around to come back up and go back up where Brownie was. And as I turned around, there's a man and woman both on the outer side of their car. She was going to the bathroom. And when I turned around and come back, she was getting them britches up. And so she may have to pull them back down again. But to me, that's something that happened that I've always remembered to tell as a story. And that's quite an experience.
That is great. You know, you guys, a lot of you guys drove your cars from one race to another and things like that. Back when this all first got started, you guys was running so many races. Did you ever do that, or did you trailer your cars, or how did that all work?
Well, we used to tow bar the cars up until 59, 58. I bought a trailer, and I was about the first one that started trailering my car. I went to California and seen a trailer that Bill Strop had out there. Boy, that was a nice trailer to haul a race car on. And so I bought me one, because if you wreck the car, bend the toe in and everything, you got to work on it like heck to get it so you can tow it home and then work on it in the shop. With a trailer, you roll it up on there and go, and then get to the shop and redo it. Was so important. Then later on, everybody got to where they had trailered the car, because it's hard to tow it with the front end all bent up. And you did that a lot back in those days, and then you had to work on it so you could tow it. But the cars, the races that we run was mostly quarter-mile racetracks, and you bump and knocked a lot, and we tore the cars up so you couldn't tow them down the road.
Now, was there any ever, you talk about tow barring the cars and things like that between races, was there any hijinks or anything going on outside of the racetrack? Now, you know, reason I asked, you got all these racers, you know, just running down the road between these tracks. Did those cars ever come off the tow bar and maybe some fun being had?
Yeah, I was working for Frankie Snyder in 1952 or 3, in Florida. We went to Orlando to race, and we stopped at a diner always after on the way back to Plant City or whatever. And anyway, Frankie let the guy tow the car with a truck that he had, and we was in the car. And so we pulled into the diner, and the guy's name was Spud. And he pulled in, and we looked back, and I said, "Where's the race car?" So he said, "I don't know." It wasn't even hooked on the truck. You know, it took us about half the night to find that race car in the swamp.
Was there any alligators or snakes in it?
No, there was a big sign that said Highway 17 South, and that race car hit that sign, went through the sign on the other side, but the board fell back down, and you didn't even know it had been tore up. And we kind of finally got out with lights and seen where the wheels had come off and went in the weeds, and finally found the race car. But we was a long time finding that thing.
Did it tear it up very bad?
No, it didn't tear it up at all. We pulled it out of there, got it back up, got it on the road, and went on down the road.
That's funny. That's funny. I live down here in Gainesville. I don't know what they were like back then, but I know there's some way out of the way.
The last time I was running down that highway there, 60, whatever it goes from Orlando east to Tampa, that sign was still there, 17 South. But we was we raced at the Polo Grounds in New York City, where the Dodgers used to play baseball. And so we run there that night. So the next afternoon, we're going to run Montreal, Quebec. Well, that's about 400 miles and no interstate. So we run all night, get up there, we get into Montreal, and not far from the racetrack, this guy's standing on the side of the street, and when we pulled up to the stoplight, he's talking to us, but he's talking in French. And so I didn't know what the heck he meant, as it said. So anyway, we go to another stoplight. He was running, got to the stop sign before we got away from the next one, and he's talking. I still didn't know, so I just went on to the racetrack, and the promoter says, "Why didn't you stop and have breakfast?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know you served." He had a special restaurant. He's telling me the guy was trying to tell me to turn into, and he said, "I had a guy down there on the street to tell you." I said, "I couldn't understand nothing that guy said." And then I sat on the pole, and that whole race was announced in French.
Oh no! How did you find out? If it was announced in French, how did you find out what the lineup was?
Well, I went to Johnny Bruner and I said, where am I starting? He said, the pole. I said, well, I wouldn't know before what that guy said. You know, I didn't know any French, still don't today.
That's funny. That's funny. Do you go to any races now?
Very few. I haven't been to a race this year.
Not this year? What's the last race you went to?
Atlanta last year.
Atlanta, you live right up
I
there
live
by
about
Atlanta,
15
right?
miles from the airport. I mean, from the racetrack.
Okay.
From the racetrack.
Okay, well that's nice. Yeah. Do you follow the series on a weekly basis, or do you just check?
I watch it if I'm around. I watch it on television most every race. Yeah.
Well, let's just ask you then. Who do you like since we're one race into this chase? And then I've got another question for you, but. We're one race into this chase. Who you liking for the championship this year?
Well, that's a simple answer.
Okay.
His name is Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson.
You ever heard of him?
No, I don't think I have. I think my wife's employed by one of his sponsors though.
That's the first pick.
That's the first pick? You got a backup pick? I don't think we need one this year.
I kind of lean on Hamlin, but I got a feeling he's got a problem of bragging about what he's going to do. Now he's already told everybody he's going to win the race in New Hampshire. You don't start counting your chickens before they hatch. And he's already saying he's got a thing on television saying that's my chase. It ain't his to chase whatsoever. And this thing ain't no telling how close it'll be to the end. But you know, there's the top 5 definitely could win that championship, I think.
I think you're right.
Maybe even 6 or 7. If they don't have any trouble and they finish consistently, definitely the first 5 could win the championship.
Now, what do you think about this chase? What do you think about the chase format versus just
Hey,
straight
I think
points?
it's fair for everybody. It's as good as any system they can think up. You can make changes to everything. And another thing is you ain't going to please everybody. There's going to be somebody that don't like this or don't like that or don't like the way NASCAR's doing it. And it's just something that you can't please all the fans.
Right. Now, you talked about Jimmy Johnson. Let's talk about Jimmy Johnson a little bit, and we've talked about a little bit about gray area, what you and I would consider, the gray area, probing rule books, and you really can't do that these days. Now, there's a lot of people out there that have put the cheater label on Jimmy and Chad and that group. But what do you got? What's your opinion on things like that? I call it old school racing.
Well,
is what I call it.
There's only 2 kind of racers. There's the ones that cheat, the ones that don't cheat. Now, the ones that don't cheat, they're running last. And you can call it cheating, you can call it innovative engineering or whatever you want to call it. If you don't do everything you can with that rule book as thick as it is now, you're not going to be up front. And the more engineering or help or the more resources you got to do things and build things and try to get it by inspection, the closer you're going to be to the front. And Jimmy and Chad, they are a tremendous combination together. Both are smart, and I'm telling you, John's a smart race car driver, and he's already proven it, while winning 5 championships.
Yes, you're definitely right. I agree with you. I think we're going to be calling him 6th time at the end of this year. But, there's a lot of people out there that don't see it that way. They see Jimmy Johnson as not showing a lot of emotion and not much of a personality or anything like that. But I know exactly what you're seeing, Rex, and when behind the wheel of the car, the man's an animal. Yeah, he is just a beast behind the wheel of the car.
We're not supposed to be judging his personality. We're supposed to be judging his racing ability.
I couldn't agree with you more. There seems to be a lot of that judging personalities over what they do behind the wheel of the car.
But I guarantee you can't. Smoke is 3rd, I think it is. You can't count him out for the champion. He's 3rd or 4th. You can't count him. He's only about 8 points behind. Man, I'm telling you, he could win the championship again just as easy as anybody.
Well, I'll tell you what, you turn your back on Smoke, you're going to get snake bit, that's for sure. But you never know.
And every racetrack that they've got to run from here on out, he's good on.
That is true. That is true. We've seen what he done last year at this time, didn't we? Now, it's obvious you still love the sport, Rex. You still pay attention to it and very, very knowledgeable about what's going on. What other kinds of things do you like to do now that you've got time to do whatever it is you want to do in life?
Well, I guess I'll be chasing race cars. I give up chasing women.
That probably wasn't a bad idea now, was it?
82, they run too fast for me to catch them. And if I caught one of them, I don't know if I'd know what to do.
I have a hard time believing that, Rex. What other kinds of things you like to do, buddy? Oh my gosh. What else do you do, Rex, to occupy your time?
I've been I took care of my ex-wife since 2002, and she died last December with Alzheimer's, and I spent a lot of time in the last 5 or 6 years taking care of her. And now I just travel. I go to a lot of events. I was in Virginia last weekend. I was in Augusta over the weekend at their event down there. So that's the biggest thing I do as far as traveling.
Do you have any events coming up here in the near future?
I'm going to be at Occoneechee Hillsborough Speedway the 27th, 28th of this month. The 14th of October, which is before that event, they're going to have a thing in Mooresville at Memory Lane for Bud Moore to honor him there. and all the proceeds go to charity. And I go to that event every year. And
you ever make it down here in the Florida region at all?
I used to go to Daytona. I hadn't been down there in 3 years now, but I come to Jacksonville in December to the Jacksonville Hall of Fame thing they have up there.
When is that, Rex?
It's around December the 15th, something close that. I don't know the exact. They don't even have it wrote down yet.
Well, I'll tell you what. When that happens, let's get in touch, and I'll meet you over there, and we'll see what kind of trouble we can get in.
Well, they have a pretty nice event. I'm just trying to think if I had a phone number or something you could call them. But hey, I'll keep your number. When I get a date on it, I'll try to call you.
That'll work. We're definitely going to talk before then. I'm enjoying this conversation. I'd like to do another segment on this and talk about some more things at a later date, and maybe do this in a 2 or 3 part series, kind of like the history, and keep in touch with you if that sounds all right with you.
Well, a DJ's not supposed to get tired talking anyway. That's his profession. But if you do, hey, I'll be glad to come and talk on your show anytime you want.
Well, we're gonna take you up on that offer. I'm not done talking to you yet. I just wanted to throw it out there that I wanted to keep doing this, you know, and do some different series and different parts with you and talk about some different things. I'd like to, what I'd like to talk to you about now is you had mentioned, if this is all right, you had mentioned that your wife had Alzheimer's and you've been taking care of her and stuff, and I have my grandmother. Also has that disease, and that's pretty hard to do. And so that disease is just it's a hard disease to deal with. It's the worst disease I've ever seen.
When you lose your mind, you lose control of your whole body. She lost her mind so much that she tried to chew water, and
right.
When you lose those abilities, it's just you're done. You know.
Right. You're a stand-up guy, Rex. I'm telling you. I like I said, I know how hard it is to go through that, and for you to be doing that for the last 5 or 6 years, I have to just tell you how much that impresses me, and what a stand-up guy you are. Now, you know, we get together in Jacksonville, going to a good positive point. Since you can't chase them women down anymore, I'll see if I can chase them down and hold them for you.
That's great. Yeah, I'll take you up on that.
All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. We're going to get ready to end this interview, Rex. Is there anything out there you want to tell NASCAR fans of the day, or any message that you want to give young and up-and-coming drivers? This is your time to say whatever it is you want to say.
Well, you know how to make a small fortune in NASCAR?
I think I do, but go ahead.
Start with a big one.
That's in all forms of racing, isn't it?
But a young driver coming up without finances, he's never going to make it. I mean, he'd have to be awful lucky and be at the right place at the right time with the right person and something said, and you get a break and get a ride and maybe do good and get up front and so where people notice you. But for you to not get hit on something like that, you're never going to make it in racing today.
Hey, you know what? There is a young kid coming up like that, Rex, and I bet you've heard of him. His name's Kyle Larson.
Yeah, I sure have.
Hey, what do you think about Kyle Larson?
Well, I already seen him win a race at Gresham Motorsports Park.
Uh-huh.
And don't know much about him other than that. The only thing I do know is Tony is really on his case and pushing him all he can. If Tony likes him, I like him.
I'll tell you, I've had a chance to watch Kyle for many years now, run up around Indiana in sprint cars and things.
Uh-huh.
And the kid is just so smooth. His throttle control is just out of this world. You know, he's winning and everything. As a matter of fact, there was a really good race in Hofstad, Indiana, Saturday night. He finished second in it, but a guy by the name of Darren Clayton in 410 sprints actually beat him.
Uh-huh.
And but anyway, Kyle come back last night and won at Waynesfield, Ohio last night.
Uh-huh.
And but yes, you're right. This kid, he's a natural, that's for sure. And I think, he doesn't have a lot of money backing him that I know of. And I think if anybody's going to do it in this sport, like we've been talking about.
Well, he got hired. He got hired as a development driver by Canasic, didn't he?
Yeah. He's in the Ganassi camp. But that leads us into something else. This development driver stuff. We've seen a lot of that back over the last few maybe 6-7 years ago, when that was really a big thing. But it seems that maybe that slowed down a little bit. And we're seeing just the financials in NASCAR right now are really slowing down a little bit.
You bet.
You see some changes. I mean, we're seeing, TV ratings. There's all kinds of arguments on this, the economy, or whatever's causing it. But I think we're going to see some changes, coming up here over the next few years. They're going to have to with this business model.
The new contract with NASCAR on TV is going to be a big thing, I'm sure, because the programs are not making the profit on them they want, and they're wanting to cut back on everybody, and they'll cut back on NASCAR, and then NASCAR will cut back on what they pay to the drivers for the TV money.
Yeah, well, we're already starting to see that. I seen where NASCAR media laid off a bunch of people, and the downsizing's already starting before the TV contracts are even
negotiated. There's been a huge layoff in NASCAR.
Yeah, it's been huge, that's for sure. Now, leading into that, we look at what happened in these big tracks with all these seats, and that kind of like there was an explosion